Thank you, Kari, and thank you for inviting me back, Henny and Kari. The question now is whether my contribution will be a break in our seminary or continuity. I think it will be both. As quite obvious break is that I will use PowerPoints. Partly because I don't speak my own language, and it will be a bit more easy to follow me when you have some text on the board. But also because I will use quite a lot of quotes, and then you can read the quotes yourself. Break, yes, also because we now move into contemporary discourses. And other disciplines than the 3 first days. Today it will be ethics and tomorrow sociology. But I also hope that you, after these 3 hours today, will see that it is also continuity, because the themes we are working on are the same as in the first 3 days. Love, negative philosophy, and several more. Today we are 3 keynote speakers. We have decided to have equal time in our 3 contributions. And in the end we will try to find place for a dialogue in the 4th hour. My prelude today is very contemporary. It's from Molivos, the last weeks, where I stayed 4 days before our seminary. Every morning we could find these rests all around the harbor, and we could see the terrible little boats the refugees used to come to Lesbos. 4,000 inhabitants in the town, 200 refugees every night for days and for weeks. Many were rescued from the waves by the Coast Guard. And I saw the Coast Guard officers play football with the very wet children in the morning in the harbor. They come wet, hungry, desperate, neighbors from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, you name it. What would I do? Would I act according to the ethical demand coming from my neighbor? Spontaneous and selfish? Would I use my head, my conscience, or simply call the police because I am afraid? I know what Melinda does, the taverna queen in the harbor of Molivos. Together with some good helpers, she serves 3 meals every day under a plastic shelter in the harbor. She collects other things these people need in their situation. And I know what Papa Status has done for quite a lot of time now. More than a year, working all over this island, demonstrating that also the Orthodox Church here in Greek has a great social conscience. He collects money, food, all the people need. I asked him last year why he did it. And his answer was very, very simple. Because they come. Because they come. I don't know exactly whether this is eros, or agape, or philia, or all 3. I know that this is love. because love is recognizable when it occurs. And love is, in my opinion, beyond definition. It is in the air, or more exact, in the space between us, in the society, in the culture. And I think Melinda and Stratis act because they are hit by the ethical demand coming from the other, to use the language of the Danish ethicist and theologian K.E. Løgstrup. What is our response when the neighbor knocking at our door is a refugee? Will we use our head, conscience, or simply call the police? We have always preludes in the Norwegian masses. This was the prelude. Love is in the relation is a main theme in modern ethics. And Tor reminded us of this sentence in his lecture on Monday. It is also a very important concept of the ethics and philosophy of Martha C. Nussbaum, an American philosopher who really could have attended this seminar, because she always used the classical texts, especially Aristotle and the Stoics, and moved them sort of into the modern and postmodern debates about which society we will build. She goes one step further than Tor, because Tor's sentence on Monday was, love is a form of relation. Nussbaum states, love is relation. Two challenges in modern ethics. The first one is whether love can develop from self-love to love of the neighbor, to love of several neighbors, to love of neighbors without a face at all. And the second one, is it a place for ethics or love in environmental ethics and in politics today? Tor reminded us of the heritage from the Hebrew tradition. Perhaps I will be a little less critical than Tor was, stating that this command is maybe the most important sentence in the history of ethics. And I choose Leviticus instead of Tor's choice. They are nearly the same. And as you remember in chapter 19:18, the first formulation is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. You can understand it as a particular command within the group, within the nation. Hard to follow if I should try to love all my fellow Norwegian. It's a hard task, but not as hard as the second formulation in the same chapter, where in the most English translations they use alien, but in some they use stranger. You shall love the stranger as yourself. And this is sensational in the history of ethics, that in this little people, for some 2,500 years ago, maybe more, they had a command that they should not keep to the particular situation, but be universal in this command to love, including the stranger. And then, as you remember, Jesus Christ formulated the command of neighbor love even more provocating. Love your enemies. My students, they are never allowed to talk about the Christian command of love. To talk about the Christian command of love, I think it is nearly anti-Semitic, because the command of love is our treasure, our heritage from the Jewish tradition, and that we shall always keep in mind. Maybe it is only the quite impossible part of this command which is Christian. Love your enemies. This is the very master of the philosopher for an ethicist who tried to use the command of neighbor love in modern ethics, Emmanuel Levinas. Dag will speak more about Emmanuel Levinas in the last hour today. He is the expert, but this man is also very dear to me. He lived from 1908 until 1997, nearly 90 years of age, giving lectures even the last year he was alive. He is together with Hannah Arendt, two of the most famous students of the existentialist philosopher Martin Heidegger. And both of them have much to be thankful for, and they have written it to the phenomenological and existentialist traditions and to Martin Heidegger. But they are both also very critical. And I will put forward their critics of Martin Heidegger's understanding of love. But first, the traditional Western understanding of the command of neighbor love, says Emmanuel Levinas, is that you translate it as such: you shall love your neighbor because he resembles yourself. It's a lot in Norwegian, a lot of children's songs going on this theme. The others is like you. You have to love them. Levinas is very, very critical of building an ethics on the doctrine of sameness. He accepts sameness as important, but it is not enough at all. And you first quote here, you shall know Western philosophy, he says in his doctor thesis, Totality and Infinity, Western philosophy has most often been an ontology, a reduction of the other to the same. A reduction of the other to the same. It's a fantastic sentence. And the same thought, the neutralization of the other who becomes a theme or an object is precisely his reduction to the same. If Melinda had said to me, I have to go to the harbor because the refugees, they are like me. This would be what Heidegger is very critical of. Because all human beings who not are like me are bad off. People with little Bambi effect, we say, little Bambi effect, we say, in victimology. Some victims, they don't appeal to me. They don't make my heart bleed. They can be dangerous. they can be ugly, they can be very, very different. And that is the bad part of an ethics built on sameness, that groups who are not like us, they come bad out of this situation. And then it is another critic from Levinas, which is important here. Actually, he says that a neighbor ethic built on the principle of sameness, where you love what you can consider your own in the face of the other, it's a sort of narcissism. If you only love that part of the other that reminds you of yourself, it is like holding a mirror up in front of the other's face. You love the picture of yourself in the face of the other. You never see him. You never see her. But let me, as a critical thinker, stop a little bit. The ethics of sameness, of likeness, has given arguments to several projects of liberation the last 200 years. The first against slavery, oppression of women and children. And if we visit radical animal activists today, they can also argue that animals deserve a better treatment because they are similar to us. Women and men are pretty much the same, alike, black and white, children, adult, animals and human beings. Now you hear an echo from the French Revolution: freedom, likeness, and brotherhood. The slogan is important, has been very important in history. Equal rights because we are equal. It's more challenging to say equal rights because we are strangers. But that is one of the important challenges from Emmanuel Levinas. He is more radical. He will build the ethics of neighbor love upon the doctrine of sameness still, but also of a fundamental recognizing of the other as different. It's a wonderful interview made with him. He made a lot of interviews, and this one is to one of the French magazines who could bring an interview which is 50 pages long. It's from a couple of years before he died. And he is talking about this topic. And suddenly he remembers a colleague in the university, a colleague which irritates him. This man, he says to the interviewer, this man is proud because he has been married to the same woman for 30 years. And he says, no, I can read her as an open book. I know her completely. And then the critics from Levinas, what a lie. And which exciting mysteries this man misses when he tells himself that no, he has come to an end. He knows his wife completely. My neighbor is a stranger. My neighbor is mystery. My neighbor is secret. My neighbor is a still undiscovered continent. That is the way of Levinas talking about the neighbor. And here, I think you can find one of the lines to the seminary. Isn't this cataphatic thinking and apophatic thinking about the neighbor. Okay, he says, Levinas is also a realist. We must use the cataphatic thinking about the neighbor, about the other parts in an ethics. We have to do that. We have to use what we know. But still we have to say the other part is a stranger, a mystery. And to go into that mystery, that is the apophatic way. In my interpretation, what Levinas here does is to give us a secular reading of some very important themes in negative theology. In other parts of his thinking, he also comes much closer to theology. And it is also a divine dimension in his thinking. But here I try to use one of his main thoughts in the neighbor ethics. Then you can understand that he is critical against his master, Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger was not at all a relational thinker, as Levinas is. He is thankful, but he is critical. But this woman is much more critical. Hannah Arendt, a lot of people thought that she should be the first woman becoming professor in philosophy in Germany in the early 1930s. And she had her thesis written in 1926, exactly about love, Der Liebesbegriff by Augustin. And I have not time to go deep in it, but some of the Hannah Arendt readers today find, as early as this, they find her critics against Martin Heidegger, and also a completely other approach to ethics. The story, Martin Heidegger became her doctor father, and for a while also her lover. Many thought that he also would help her when it became dangerous for a Jew to continue in the academic world in Germany. It was dangerous from 1933, but he didn't. He broke with her, and as you remember, he was very positive to the Nazi regime. Others, for example Karl Jaspers, helped her to flee Germany early in 1938 in time, first to Geneva and then to the United States, where she became a big star. I am not a historian, but I know that we have to be critical against our sources. I will not speculate how much in this life story of Hannah Arendt which influenced her critics on Heidegger or not. But it came to a sort of reunion between them in the early 1960s. This is a bit demanding quote, but very important, from a famous article on Heidegger's Dasein, Heidegger's theory of being from 1946. A self taken in its absolute isolation is meaningless. And if it is not isolated, but involved in the everyday life of the one, it is no longer self. The ideal of the self follows as a consequence of Heidegger's making of man what God was in earlier ontology. A being of this highest order is conceivable only as single and unique and knowing no equals. I love that quote, because there she accuses the secularization project in Martin Heidegger's philosophy for making man God and contributing to the isolation of the man in this non-relational being. In my youth, as Torstein, I struggled with sein und Zeit, being and time, for months, because my most dear professor wanted me to write my thesis on Heidegger. I was only 24, it was a hard task, and I was so disappointed when I thought I had understood the text. Because where is the ethics? Where are the others? Where are the society? Where are the world? Okay, my reaction was that I started to write books for children and got a career some years as a prison chaplain before I returned to the academic work. One very private thing. I married very early to my dear wife, and she was German speaking, and she hated me and my friend sitting at home day after day with sein und Zeit. And one day she came into the room and is screaming to me, Paul, ich bin das neue Dasein in deiner Geschichtlichkeit. I am the new being in your life. Using the Heidegger terminology to knock me down. It was wonderful. Heidegger's terminology against me, reminding me that it exists a world outside the mind of the man. Hannah Arendt is very sharp in her critics. I know what she has to say about love. In the same article from 1946, it is precisely an originary relationship to the neighbor and to the world that is excluded, he says. And one of my other favorites, a love that excludes others, is what she hopefully read from the text of Heidegger and not her private experiences. A love that excluded others. I think this is an important critique, not only of Heidegger, but of several philosophical and theological positions in our near past, in East and in West. Positions which are introvert, which are worldless, and maybe even egoistic. But still, I underline that Levinas and Arendt, they were thankful to their teacher. And this is a wonderful book I have written before this seminary, The Origins of the Other, by Cornell as editor, and Samuel Moyne says, it is a loyalty to a teacher's search for truth, requires turning against him when he goes astray. That's a wonderful sentence. I will give it to all my doctor students from here on. Of course, you can hear that this is part of a much bigger term from ratio or from Dasein also to relatio. And it is a stream of important thinkers who had contributed to this relational term. Buber, Arendt, Sartre, de Beauvoir, Levinas, Løgstrup. It's changes in the understanding of ontology and changes in the conceptions of what love at all is. Maybe my second attempt to build a bridge. Is it so that the Eastern tradition is a much more relational tradition in theology than most part of the Western traditions? I don't know the answer, but maybe we can talk about it, we can discuss it. Martha Nussbaum, the insight first introduced in the sphere of friendly love by Aristotle. Love is fundamentally a relation, not something in a single person at all, a relation that involves the give and take of a time of feeling, thought, benefits and conversations. He uses active her reading of the Nicomachean Ethics with this long and lovely and quite simple to read analysis of friendship in this book, stating that the relationality is not a new thing in the history of philosophy. Something more about the command of neighbor love. Zygmunt Bauman, the sociologist and philosopher, also influenced by Levinas, has written a very nice article called "Morality Begins at Home." He is critical towards several readings of the commandment of love, but he will keep it. But he tells us that it's very easy to keep the commandment at home. When you have your beloved and your children, easy. But when the moral party of two, I and the other, arrive disrobed from our social trappings, stripped of status, social distinctions, handicaps, positions or roles, neither rich or poor, high or low, mighty or disempowered, reduced to the bare essentiality of our common humanity. That is his way of interpreting Levinas and the relation between the other and I. Isn't this unrealistic? Is it at all possible? Is the important questions from the sociologist Bauman. He will keep the morality which begins at home in the deep love between the just married couple. He will keep it, but we have to go further. The moral self constitutes inside such a space cannot but feel uncomfortable the moment the moral party or two is broken into by the third. There starts the problem. And Levinas, of course Levinas sees it. And Bauman is of the opinion that that is the main problem Levinas is struggling with the last 2 decades of his writing. It is not just the moral self which feels uncomfortable when the third comes. So do its painter, Levinas himself. No better proof of his discomfort is needed than the obsessive, almost compulsive urgency with which he returns in his late writings and interviews to the problem of the third. In the same book, and also in another one, Liquid Love, Baumann is visiting another of the neighbor ethics philosopher, Løgstrup. And Løgstrup's analysis of trust between me and my neighbor. Trust as the spontaneous belonging to life itself in the thinking of Løgstrup. Trust as the primary reaction towards the other. And then Baumann is very critical in what a word lived Løgstrup when he wrote about trust in this naive way he writes. I know where he lived, he says. He lived in Jylland in Denmark, in a beautiful house in a rose garden with his beloved wife, and the sun was shining. Fans and addicts of reality TV shows would reverse Løgstrup's verdict. It is characteristic of human life that we normally encounter one another with natural suspicion. Look at all the films, look at all the series, look at the whole B-culture telling us life is a hard game for hard people. And look at the world news, he says. But still, he wants to keep the heritage from Levinas and from Løgstrup, and especially this thought about love against the stranger. Maybe the problem nowadays is that we fear each other more and more. And in some societies, this is coming to tragic dimensions, where you have big walls against your private homes, and you have companies guarding your home, alarms all over. Eva and I were walking outside yesterday, and so it has come a lot of new dogs on the road to Metochi. And we were asking why, and Eva said maybe it's mere fear now, so much refugees on the island. Xenophobia, fear of the stranger, is becoming one of the new big diseases in the Western world. Maybe also as a result of the even more multicultural society. And Baumann says, mixophobia, fear of this multicultural situation, is growing in our cities. How can we build more lovely places where people can start trusting each other again? And his very poetic challenge, how is it possible to come from mixophobia to mixophilia? That's also part of our thinking of love today. That is the problem in the heritage from the neighbor ethics. That is another one. This is our closest relatives among the primates. We have 98.7% common gene mass. That is even another problem. What about the challenges which not have a face? It's many romantic ethicists today who stop there. Also some very non-romantic, as Peter Singer, my famous discussion partner in modern ethic literature, utilitarist, saying, you old Christian, you old neighbor ethicists, have two choices. One choice is to include the bonobo and the primates in humanum, because they are as us. I have had a dear brother with Down syndrome, only 4 or 5 words. We loved him. He died a couple of years ago. My brother Per would lose every competition with a trained bonobo, like Charlie at Stanford University in the United States. Charlie uses his PC. He has learned basic English. He can solve math lessons up to 6th degree now. Why is Charlie an animal and my brother Per a human? Asks Peter Singer, and asks us to rethink who are our neighbors. But he is criticized from other part of the eco-ethic universe. Why don't you go longer? Why don't you try to have a neighbor term which includes the nature as it is? Is neighbor love altruistic? Or what is it? Post and a theme around him has written a very comprehensive analysis about altruism and altruistic love. And it was interesting for me to find this quote and read it in the light of Thor's lessons on Monday and his characteristic of Christian love. Here this secular version. We characterize behavior as altruistic when it is directed toward helping others, involves a high risk or sacrifice to the actor, is accompanied by no external reward, and is voluntary. This is not a theological or Christian book, but it comes very, very close to the reading Thor gave us from John on Monday. Is that possible? But let me be a bit more optimistic here at the end of the lesson. Father Andrew, could also say that Dionysius and Maximus, they thought of love as a virtue. Aristotle has taught us that it is possible to learn to be good. That is one of the reasons why pedagogues love Aristotle. He has also in this Nicomachean Ethics a very good analysis of this learning process, where he first have the picture of the worker and his disciples in the workshop. How do they learn to be a good worker? And then he go to the artist. How do an artist learn to be good in his art? And then he goes to the moral man. How is it possible to learn to be good in the moral sense? And he is optimistic. It is possible. Neighbor love is possible to learn in good surroundings. But unfortunately, the colleagues of Thale and Paul, the famous sociologists of institution sociology, have learned us the opposite. And that is also a very important lesson. It is possible to learn to be bad, to learn to be evil, to learn violence. We have a pioneer in Norway, Nils Christie, wrote about this so early as in 1956, after interviewing Norwegian young men who had made their duty in the new Norwegian camps for Serbs during the Second World War. Of course, these camps were led by the German occupants, but the foot soldiers were Norwegian youngsters. And the death numbers in these camps were as high as in Germany. 70% mortality in 2 years. And the people who learned to be evil in this short time were not monsters. They were, what Nils Christie say, people as any other. It's only the half of the story, because 1/3 didn't want to stay in the camp. They turned around when they saw what was going on. 1/3 tried to be the good guys in the system, giving more food to the sick and to the hungry. But the last third were effective torturists and killers. They learned it. Love is a virtue. It's possible to learn it. But it's also possible to learn to lose it. And this is a challenge to how we build our societies, how we build our schools, how we build our social institutions, how we build politics. And therefore it is impossible to talk about love without talking about justice. Nussbaum again. Nussbaum don't accept the dichotomies between feelings and ratio, between love and justice. We have to use both. And again she used the heritage from Aristoteles, who was one of the first who talked about feelings with a cognitive content, cognitive feelings. And that is very important. But love is no romantic feeling. Love is a relation. We were taught the first days. Now I will also say that love is also rational. It has a rationality in it. And therefore it has to lead us to justice. What would I do at the door? It was my door, my harbor, if they came here. I don't know. I hope I could accept them, invite them in. But I hope that I would think that I had to solve the whole problem alone. I would try to find allies. I would try to go into politics as well. Thank you very much. We have now got 5 minutes to come and ask some questions, and then we make a break, and then we can come back to the themes in the 4th hour. Please, Tala.
Your last comment that you would go into politics interests me, because I'm curious as to what this means for intergroup relations and political systems, which are both loving and just, so to speak. What can you say about that? Then I have to show you one of the pictures that I didn't have time to go into. This one. This is one of the philosophers who have tried to do that. Axel Honneth, so seldom as a still living philosopher in Germany now. And he is trying to include the dimension of love in his social philosophy, in his philosophy of recognition. He says that if you don't, recognition is the important thing among individuals, and if you not go further from the love until accepting the rights of the other person and struggling for them, it is not real love, he says. But love is important as a starting point. But the important thing is that he tried to tell us that we have to establish love among groups in the society as well. That's quite
quite difficult. But he is the author. He has written 3-4 books on this topic. Paul?
Yeah, your question, or rather Sigmund Baumann's question, how do we go from mixophobia to mixophilia is crucial here. A couple of comments. In social psychology, you have this famous contact hypothesis. If you get to know people, you're less prejudiced. You don't necessarily love them in a very strong sense, but you treat them decently. And actually, this hypothesis has been confirmed in many studies. What can disturb such a process is power relations, asymmetric power relations, and involving self-interests and so on. But I think there are some implications there for exactly the political attempts at structuring societies that don't create the pillars isolated from each other, facilitate meeting places. Media are often blamed for creating stereotypes, but modern technology can actually also be used the other way around. And I would like to add one more thing, and that is a kind of a praise for egalitarian politics. Egalitarian conditions facilitates trust and makes it easier to, again, if not love very strongly, at least treating other people decently.
Thank you. I agree quite a lot. In this article of Baumann, he is writing quite a lot about architecture as well, city architecture, bringing people closer. But now I think we shall have a pause and we can meet again 10:10, and then we can say goodbye to Dee and to Michelle, who are leaving us now. Have a good journey.